Did you know that in the late 1920s and early 1930s, unmarried Ghanaian women were arrested and locked up? Imagine being dragged to court or jail and your only crime is that you are a single woman. Welcome to this channel where we explore the heart of Ghana. Today, we are diving into the rounding up of unmarried women in colonial Asante. And by the way, you are invited to this sweet Ghanaian snack called Achumo. Before the narration, I want to thank you for watching even to this point. These videos take sleepless nights to research, script, film and edit. So I really appreciate your subscription and your support so far. Once upon a time in the former Gold Coast, when people in other parts of the world were still recovering from World War I, the chiefs and leaders in a number of towns and villages in the Asante Kingdom were faced with the duty of battling a huge crisis that had reared its head like a dragon, ready to burn down the whole kingdom. The crisis had to be addressed at all costs to save the kingdom from a huge calamity, and this crisis was the increasing number of unmarried women, which was termed as a moral crisis. Yes, women who refused to get married. These chiefs, in their quest to save the kingdom, issued a decree commanding all maidens to provide themselves with husbands. This was no joke at all, because after the decree, the women in towns including Asokore, Ejuso, Bekwai, Manson Kwanta, among others in the Asante Kingdom, woke up one morning to a gong being beaten, announcing the arrest of all maidens. And by maidens, we are talking about women who were the age of 15 years and above, not the 30 years threshold set for women of this generation. 15. So, you single ladies watching me now and I would have been arrested if we had found ourselves in that era. I know Africans are full of folktales, but for the record, this is not one. This isn't fiction. This is history, and there is actually historical research done to support this chronicle. Find the link on the screen and also in the description and confirm for yourself that this is no Kwekwanansi story. Now, the decree by the chiefs sent the women, the unmarried women, on a husband's hands. Some young women were successful with their hands, while others were not. And these unlucky maidens ended up being arrested by the Ahimfe police and detained. According to the chiefs, these maidens had become roaming ambassadors who were attending dances here and there, what we know today as nightclubs, and these women were jumping from one man to the other, sleeping with men everywhere and anywhere, and it was a disgrace to the township. In addition to the disgrace was the spread of sexually transmitted diseases. By now, you must be saying to yourself, but it is both men and women who contribute to the spread of these diseases. So why were the women the only ones held accountable? Hold on, the men were not left off the hook either. When a maiden was arrested and detained, she had the opportunity to mention the name of a man whom she would agree to marry. So, if there was a young man in my community whom I desire and pay an eye he has given me before, I believed he would want me for a wife. All I had to do was to name him, and this is where the men's share of the promotion comes in. As a young man, when a maiden named you, you were mandated to affirm your desire to marry her and pay a set amount as her release fee. Then, you proceeded with payment of her married fee and a bottle of gin or palm wine to the maiden's family. If a man refused to claim her, he was fined, and he either paid the same amount as the release fee or higher. So, as a bachelor, whether you claimed her or not, you could not escape making a payment. However, if a maiden refused to marry a young man after he had stepped in to set her free, she was made to pay a fine to compensate the young man. So, I think even though I said earlier that men were not left off the hook, to an extent they were, because their share of the problem was not as worse as the fates of their female counterparts, the unmarried women. The chiefs, in order to make sure no young woman escaped that exercise, came up with a plan to identify which maidens were eligible to marry but had refused to marry. As soon as a young woman had her first menses, she went to the registrar to register at the court that she was old enough to marry. And then the monitoring and the countdown began. And because of the puberty rites, it was difficult for girls to hide it when they had their menses. At this point, I believe you are wondering how true this story is, when we have all been made to believe that young women in the olden days I mean, our grandmothers and our great-grandmothers embraced marriage with their full chest. And it is only the women of this generation who have refused to prioritize marriage. Well, maybe it is the great-great-great-grandmothers of our grandmothers who did not defy marriage, because even the men in our grandmother's era also yearned for the good old days. Or what if the good old days is just a case of the grass is greener on the other side? When it had to get to a stage where arresting unmarried women and locking them up was considered a solution, then am I right to say that women of this generation haven't done their worst yet? The good old days indeed. I mentioned earlier that the reason the chiefs gave for taking such drastic approach was that these single women brought disgrace upon the towns and they ended up spreading STDs. Some married women who saw marriage as a requirement for a good and decent way of life maintained that the unmarried women simply chose to remain unmarried because they did not want to live decent lives and were too lazy to keep husbands and raise their own families. However, some unmarried women gave their own reasons for staying unmarried. According to some, since the abolition of slavery, wives had become the new slave, and the exploitation of wives' labor had become the order of the day for men to establish farms, since only few men could afford hiring laborers. As a wife, you were obligated to serve your husband, cook for him, go to the farm with him, where he would do the barest minimum and expect the wife to do the greater part of the work. All these without any economic security. To these women, they had studied the dynamics and decided to save themselves that predicament by working hard to establish their own farms. They could cater for themselves and did not see why they needed to put themselves through slavery or in the name of marriage when they did not even need these men for anything aside their seeds to help them bear children. The decision by the chiefs, they believed, was a classical example of power struggle, and thus the chiefs just wanted an opportunity to put women down again to make men feel superior to women. They buttressed their claims with another directive by the chiefs around the same time that the decree was issued, where married women were ordered to buy clothes, sandals, and other stuff for their husbands, when according to custom, it had always been the other way around. Another group also claimed that women were not getting married because they outnumbered the men, and women were not single by choice or unmarried by choice. All the above reasons are very familiar, since these are the very same contributing factors to singlehood in this generation. Hence, regardless of which of the reasons for the high numbers of unmarried women is accurate, I don't know about you, but I believe the good old days is just a myth, and that women have not really changed much with regards to marriage and morality, as some people drum into our ears every day. Women of today this, women of today that. Maybe the presence of social media in our time has rather highlighted everything, making us believe the old generation woman and the modern day woman are not cut from the same cloth. The reality, however, is that the modern day woman is just a chip from the old block. Did you already know about this history of the Asante kingdom, or this is your first time hearing about it? What do you make of this narrative? Do you still stand by the good old days assertion? You can leave your opinion in the comment section. Don't forget to subscribe and engage this video to help us reach more people with similar interests. Thank you for watching.